What inexplicable event you've ever experienced that still gives you goosebumps? Write in the comments what you think about this. Enjoy the show. Story 1. My siblings and cousins wanted to play in the cemetery because there was a full moon. It was a small cemetery next to my great-aunt's house at the edge of a very small town surrounded by cornfields. The adults were inside talking, so we stayed out. We made up a game that was a mix between chicken and tag. One person was the zombie and would lay on the ground a distance from us, and everyone else was standing in a line. We would tell the zombie to get up. They had a person in mind to grab, and we didn't know who was chosen, but had to stand there as long as we dared. Everyone was in their places, no one else walking around, nothing. To the left among the gravestones, one of my sisters and I saw what looked like a kid crawling quickly by. I didn't really think much of it, and apparently neither did she, because later we realized, wait, there were no animals around and all of us were standing where we should be. So what in the world was it? It vanished just like that. My little brother swears he saw a giant bird flying with a tail shaped like diamonds linked together. He said it was massive. I couldn't find anything online, but he said it was real, but no one believed him. Weird stuff happens in Minnesota, I guess. Story 2. I've had exactly one such experience, and I didn't even see anything. Kinda lighthearted story, but it's technically the most mysterious thing I've experienced, so it counts, I guess. Picture it. The Norwegian mountain plateaus. 5-hour hike from the nearest village. A handful of cabins around a lake full of freshwater trout. None of the cabins have electricity or plumbing. You burn logs in the fireplace to heat up the cabin. You use gas canisters to fuel the cooking stove. You light up the place with live candles or battery-powered lamps. Showers? Jump in the lake with the trout. You need to use the restroom? Here's a bucket with a toilet seat affixed to it. The cabin in question has about 4 rooms, an outhouse and a storage room for a rowboat. 2 of the rooms are bedrooms. One is the entrance room. One is the living room with a little nook for preparing simple meals. In each bedroom is a bunk bed. It was many years ago and I was there with 6 other people. My mother, my 2 brothers, my stepfather, and my 2 stepsisters. My brothers slept in one room. My stepsisters and I slept in the other room. My stepsisters shared the top bunk, while my mother and my stepdad slept in sleeping bags in the living room. I went to bed in my 2-piece pajama set consisting of trousers and a shirt. Now that the scene has been set, let's get to the weird shit. Now, I don't really believe in ghosts as such. I just know that weird shit happens, and we don't always know why. So when I woke up in the middle of the night with fear in my entire body and my brain screaming, "There's a monster in the room, don't look for it," I managed to get my bearings enough to figure out that I was having a case of sleep paralysis. I told myself, this is sleep paralysis. That's why you're filled with dread, and that's why you can't move. Just as I started to relax, I heard my mother calling my name from the living room. Moo, moo. Of course, I was still paralyzed, so I couldn't reply. Eventually, I fell asleep again. When I woke up the next morning, I was like, "Ha, mother, you spoke in your sleep." And she responded, "Yeah, well, you walked in your sleep." Turns out the reason she'd called my name was that she'd seen a girl in a nightgown leave the room I was sleeping in. The girl had walked across the living room and into the entrance room, and she just stood there. I was like, "Mother, I have never sleepwalked in my life, and I'm wearing a 2-piece pajama set, not a nightgown." And she just shrugged like, I guess it was just the resident ghost girl then. All casual. Turns out this ghost girl has been seen by several family members throughout the years. She allegedly stole my grandpa's cooking pot. Apparently one of my stepsisters had also been awoken and had seen the resident ghost girl leave the room. I hadn't seen anything at all, but I still remember the terror I felt in my body when I woke up that night. Story 3. Once I heard a knock on my door late at night, but when I checked, no one was there. I'm talking dead silence and an empty hallway. What creeps me out is that it happened several times over a few weeks, and each time it felt like something or someone was just out of sight, waiting for me to open the door. I still can't explain it, and it gives me chills thinking about it. Story 4. About a week or so after my dad died, I was over at his house. He was a builder, contractor, so he had a ton of tools. I'd spoken to my stepmom about this one tool of his I wanted to take as a memento. She agreed and said to go find it in his workshop. I was out there alone and looking for it when I clearly heard my dad call my name. He had a very uncommon voice, and how he said my name was different from everyone else. He raised the pitch at the end of my name when he said it. Not really sure of how else to explain it. I'm not superstitious, don't believe in ghosts, and think I'm pretty rational. But I will go to my grave swearing that he called my name. Still feels kind of creepy but comforting at the same time. Story 5. I have several stories that I could share here, but I'll pick my favorite one. My family, dad, mom, 2 younger sisters, was living with my dad's mom for a while. My grandfather had diabetes, double amputee, renal failure, etc. My parents had an apartment in the basement. My youngest sister slept in my grandmother's room, and my middle sister and I shared a bed in another room. My grandfather was in the hospital because he was having PT and was being fitted for prosthetics the next day. In the middle of the night, my youngest sister wakes up in tears and runs down to the basement to my parents. My grandmother obviously wakes up and follows her down as everyone is trying to figure out what was wrong because she never had bad dreams. As my sister gets to my mom, the basement window blows out and the curtains start to flutter. There is no storm, no weather, no explanation. My mom and grandmother settle my sister while my dad fixes the window. They're all getting ready to go back to bed when the phone rings. My dad answers the phone and gets the message that my grandfather had passed about 40 minutes earlier of heart failure. It was a very weird sequence of events, and to this day, my mom swears that my grandfather came to say goodbye. Story 6. Once when I was maybe 9 years old, we had recess at school. I went outside and played tetherball with my friends, and everything was pretty normal. Then, in the middle of playing tetherball, everything suddenly went dark. The entire schoolyard went dark and quiet with everything outlined in silver, and it was like time had frozen for a second. It went away super quickly, but everyone else had seen it. My friend stopped playing tetherball with me and was like, "Did you see that?" Almost everyone in the schoolyard saw it, but we've never been able to figure out what it was. And what's interesting is that a couple people didn't see it, even though they were in the same place as us. I've tried to research any random radio waves or space lasers around that area, but I've never found anything. By Story 7. Every summer, my family and I go to Mississippi to visit family. One of my earliest memories, I was very young, was when we were leaving one summer. I saw this shadowy figure sitting in a rocking chair on the front porch, rocking back and forth and waving to us as we drove away. I tried pointing it out to my parents, and they didn't see anything. I remember explaining her mannerisms to my mom, and it was consistent with her granny, who was one of the most important people in her life. Unfortunately, I never got to meet her as I was born after she had already passed. I remember it like it was yesterday, and it still blows my mind to this day. I don't know if it's the innocence of a child or what, but I feel like there's got to be some sort of correlation. It just doesn't make sense, as I knew nothing about her prior to this moment. Story 8. I'd had a couple of instances in childhood where I woke up and knew instantly something was wrong. On both occasions, I was told someone close to the family had passed away. 2 years ago, I'd been planning to go back to school because I was feeling stuck. I got to work and had this weird feeling in my gut that I couldn't explain. My coworker asked me if I was excited to start school, and I said, "Yes, unless something terrible happens to me and I can't go back." 15 minutes later, I got the call that my sister died. Story 9. I was 23 in 2021 when my mom passed away. It was devastating. She and I were incredibly close. She sparked my love for music, especially grunge and metal, and we listened all the time. I spent months trying to gather myself and take care of the things she continuously reminded me to do that I had neglected. This involved scheduling a dreaded dentist appointment. I had a lot of dental work done as a child, and while I appreciate their work, the thought of getting a simple cleaning/X-ray pushed my anxiety through the roof. Growing up, my mom never missed an appointment with me. She would sit in the corner and make faces as a way to help distract me. When I moved away for college, she never failed to remind me how long it had been since my last appointment, and that I should make one soon. I was silly and avoided the task, so when I finally scheduled that cleaning/X-ray soon after her passing, I was very nervous. I arrived, and when they called me from the waiting room, the music was typical 70s easy listening. As soon as I walked in the office, I felt like she was there. My hair stood up. I even kept looking at the chair in the corner of the room, expecting to at least catch a glimpse of her, but didn't, so I assumed it must have been grief-related. As they started to work, I noticed a couple Nirvana songs played in a row. Then, Man in the Box by Alice in Chains grabbed my attention. I thought that maybe the dentist was cool as hell until the nurse sarcastically said, hands in my mouth, "I love that we're listening to this right now." As I left, I heard the receptionist say, "I've never heard this music play here before." When I got in my car, I had an emotional release. After sobbing for a hot minute, I moved on. Maybe it was a funny coincidence. Maybe someone changed the station. I really don't know. For selfish reasons, I'd like to think maybe she manipulated the radio waves to let me know she didn't miss the appointment. Story 10. Not as creepy as many of the other stories here, but this particular event still stands out in my mind as an unbelievable coincidence. My mom's side of the family lives overseas. She calls them regularly to check in, but as someone who prefers emailing and texting, I wouldn't normally call them out of the blue on my own. In fact, before this particular day, I never had. On this day, I felt restless and had a strong urge to call. I'm someone that has the tendency to avoid things on my to-do list indefinitely, but for whatever reason, I felt that I couldn't put this off. So I dialed the number for my grandparents. My grandfather picked up the phone, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. His speech was garbled, and I immediately knew that something was wrong. I remember that his tone seemed cheerful, as though he was in good spirits, but the words were nonsensical. It was a surreal experience. I told him that I would get help, hung up the phone, and reached out to a family member that lives in the area. She rushed over and called an ambulance for my grandfather, who was in the middle of a severe stroke. He had been in good health up until that point. He was taken to the hospital and recovered fully. He'd been alone that day, and had we not communicated, he likely would have remained alone for some time, as my grandmother was out of town. He went on to live for several more years, which I will forever be thankful for. Story 11, I have three that creep me out, but one is somewhat explainable. When I was around 7 or 8 years old, I remember I was sitting in my bedroom playing SNS with my door open. I saw my dad walk past my door and into his bedroom at the end of the hall. I got up to go ask him something, but he wasn't in his room. He was outside in the backyard. There's no door to the outside in his room. Second, when I was late teens or so, I was sitting in bed late at night watching TV. It was summer, so I had my window open. I suddenly hear heavy breathing just outside my window that sounded almost identical to a bear. I muted the TV and listened to it sniffing around for about a minute. Then it went away. There are no bears where I live, so I have no idea what it was. I guess it could have been a huge stray dog, but it sounded way bigger than any kind of dog. Third was when I was just out of high school, I think. I lived with my aunt and uncle at the time, and I was up past midnight playing video games when I heard footsteps walking around the living room. It was a mobile home with wood floors, so footsteps are loud already, but these footsteps were super heavy and sounded like they were wearing boots. I could see under the door that all the lights were still off, but I could hear the steps walking all around the house. Through the living room, into the kitchen, back around through the other side of the living room. Several times they'd walk right up to my bedroom door, pause for a few seconds, then walk away. My uncle was disabled and could barely walk, and my aunt wouldn't have heavy footfalls like that, so I assumed someone broke in. Cell phones weren't common yet, but I had my own separate landline in my room. For some reason, instead of calling the police, I called the main landline in the house, hoping that my aunt would answer from their room, and hopefully the ring would scare the intruder away. When my aunt answered, I told her to get her gun because someone was in the house. She came out with the gun, I came out of my room, and nobody was out there. All the doors were still locked, and we checked all the rooms. Nothing. I heard the footsteps right up until I called the main phone and they stopped. I still have no idea what it could have possibly been other than a several minutes long auditory hallucination. Story 12. I think I have never experienced anything weird, but my mom told me something that happened to her when I was a baby. She was going down the bus and she fell down with me in her arms. She said I kind of flew of her arms and she fell. After falling, she looked at me concerned and I was chill and sitting down on the floor like if I was just put down by someone. She said she can't explain how. I didn't even get hurt. I was just sitting looking at her. Story 13. Mine is very mild and rather silly, but I'll always remember it. My mom had this standing fan that she used during the summer. One day she told me there's something weird going on with this fan. It was making strange noises, like something was whooshing through it. She believed it was a ghost that was moving through it, maybe because it was bored or something. I, being skeptical, told her it was probably the motor that was reaching the end of its life. But she kept complaining of the fan. Over and over again, it would make this strange noise. One day, she had gone for a nap, with her fan on, and her bedroom door open. I was on my way to my bedroom, which was right next to hers, and then I heard it. It was like she described, a strange whooshing sound going through the fan blades. I stopped just outside her bedroom doorway listening. After a few seconds, I decided to check it out. I walked into her bedroom towards the fan and put my ear to the motor, thinking that was the cause. But the moment I did that, the whooshing sound stopped abruptly. I kept my head next to the motor for a good 30 seconds, and nothing. Feeling quite bamboozled, I left. I still wonder to this day if there really was a ghost playing with the fan just for shits and giggles. Story 14. I was in Ghana for school, 2015. It was late at night where I and a roommate were walking back to our rented room. Note, I was in my final year and a couple months away from my nationwide exams. A mysterious man in a suit about 6'6" stops us, looks me dead in my eyes and says, "You're going to fail your exams, these are your results," and walks away. My friend and I look at each other kind of creeped out and laugh. Months pass by, I write my exams and I get my results back. Lo and behold, just like the man said, I failed, and the same results he gave me back then were the same results I go, word for word. Till today, I don't know who that man was or how he knew I was going to fail, but every time I think about it, I get more and more confused. Story 15. Was watching an episode of Mr. Robot with my 16-year-old son in our basement when I heard the deepest, most sonorous boom that I've ever heard. Not super loud necessarily, but coming from a very deep place. Not construction pile driver boom, more Balrog from Middle-earth kind of noise, enveloping and sobering. Repeated itself every 20 seconds for about 4 or 5 times. This happened every 5 days or so for a few weeks, never determined the source. Story 16. I was babysitting my cousins when they were young and getting them ready for bed upstairs. I was reading them a story and heard a metal clank downstairs, and it sounded like something moved across the floor. I went downstairs to investigate, and in the hall way next to the stairs, there was a vent with the typical metal covering, and it was completely off the vent as if someone picked up the cover and moved it over a feet or two. I was kind of creeped out by it. This was at my grandparents' house, and they think it was the cat came out of the vent and did that. It has never happened before, and it didn't happen again, as far as I know. Story 17. I live in a very spacious house, in an upper-class suburb of a big city, a very calm area with mostly old, rich PPL. 2 years ago, while watching TV, I saw a flash of light coming through my windows, something very projecting and fast, reminiscent of a camera flash. I thought it came from my TV, so I wasn't worried, until it happened every now and then before I went to bed, even when the TV was off. I watched through my windows several times and nothing was there. While it seemed alarming, at the same period, I also heard every Sunday at 2 a.m. some very weird noises, like heavy scratching coming from the walls. I even recorded the noises because it was very unsettling. Some people on forums said it could have been a rat or some little animal, but how would a rat scratch every Sunday at the same hour? I do not hear these noises, nor see the flash anymore, but I literally don't know what it could have been. Story 18. One afternoon, I was sitting at a stoplight in a major city with traffic around me. The road was very straight and I was familiar with driving it. A heavy summer rainstorm started and it poured so hard it was difficult to see the road. The light changed, traffic crawled along. A few minutes later, I pulled up to another traffic light, stopped, and the rain stopped. As I looked around, I realized that I didn't recognize any of the buildings. I finally found a street name sign, pulled over, and looked at a map. I was now driving on a street that ran parallel to the street that I'd been driving on, but I had never turned off that other street. I'd only driven straight. I still can't explain it. Story 19. After my parents' divorce, my mother, brother, and I moved into my great-grandfather's house that he built in the 1940s. It's nothing special, just a simple farmhouse held together with redneck ingenuity. My great-grandfather was a horrible person. Think the sadistic sociopath that never got caught. It's a real shame that nothing was ever done. He passed while I was younger than 10, so I have little to no memory of him. After moving in, weird and scary things started to happen. In hindsight, I suppose what happened wasn't necessarily the scariest thing to ever happen, but emotions were being fueled by the messy divorce. Objects would go missing and reappear in plain sight, seemingly out of thin air. It was extremely frustrating because it was usually objects that were needed, like clothes that were set out for a meeting, or the laundry soap. These objects would be found in the most obvious places, like the middle of the dining room table, days after they went missing. We would hear booming footsteps up and down the creaky stairs. It would always happen at night when we were all getting ready for bed or already in our rooms. Again, inconvenient and unnerving, especially since we were on the lookout for people potentially breaking into our house. Again, messy divorce. No one was ever in our house, and we could never understand why it happened. There would be rooms with ice-cold temperature pockets or pockets of particular smells, like the stale tobacco great-grandpa chewed or his sickly aftershave. The worst thing to happen was the walking figures, seen walking through the hallway and peeking into rooms. Throughout the night, my mother would be heard telling my brother or I to go to bed, and due to the close proximity of our rooms, we could hear her talking. We would always reply that we were in bed and didn't know what she was talking about. Other times, I remember getting out of bed to talk to whoever was up and in the hallway, just to find everyone was asleep. Thankfully, these occurrences have slowly faded away and are just distant memories at this point. My favorite encounter occurred after my dear kitties crossed the Rainbow Bridge. They've been seen running between rooms at the end of the main hallway. At one point, I caught myself calling out to them as if they were still alive. It hurt a lot at first, but I've come to find it comforting, as if they are still around, waiting for me to join them when the time is right. And story the 20th of November 2011. I'm home from college for Thanksgiving break. My parents are out for the night at a basketball game, so I have the house to myself. Every Thanksgiving, we host my dad's side of the family. His brother, my uncle, would always fly in from out of state the evening prior. This evening, his flight was set to land after 11 p.m., and my parents were going to pick him up after the game ended. My uncle is a heavy-set dude. He's a dairy farmer and a cowboy hobbyist who enjoys riding horses and caring for his firearms, and it wasn't unlike him to wear his cowboy boots with spurs as his everyday look. It's about 9 p.m. I'm up in my bedroom on the second floor, door open, with the TV on low as I chill on my laptop playing Minecraft. That's when I hear the door from the garage to the laundry room open on the first floor. It closes firmly. I then hear a heavy set of footsteps and the clinking of spurs as somebody walks from the laundry room, through the kitchen, into the front entry, and around to the first floor bathroom. I hear the bathroom door open and then close. I get up and, from the top of the stairs, shout a hello to my uncle. There's no answer and no sound either. No bathroom fan, no rustling of clothes, nothing. I pick up my cell phone and call my parents. They answer, and I can hear the basketball game in the background. I ask if my uncle had landed early, and with a confused inflection, they say, no, his flight is still set to land after 11 p.m. That's when an eerie feeling sets in. I say goodbye and hang up. I grab a wooden staff from the corner of my bedroom. I was and am still a Renaissance fair enthusiast, LOL, and creep down the stairs. When I hit the landing and turn, the bathroom door is closed. The lights are off inside because I can't see them on beneath the door. There is no noise. I ask for my uncle again. Nothing. So I approach, open the door, and obviously there is nobody there. But I know what I heard. It wasn't a single sound, and it all lasted probably 15 seconds. How would I have imagined something so distinct? This was only one of a handful of legitimately weird and creepy things to happen in that house. A couple of other instances were even witnessed by close friends who remember it all very clearly. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like it. Be sure to write comments and share your stories.